Hey there, this is John McDavitt once again for the Breakthrough Creative, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. My guest today is a heavy hitter, not just creatively, but also entrepreneurially. Jim Jozwiak began his career as a high-end performer who played the trumpet. He would play for Chicago Musical Theater, and he would play in the bands that would be hired to back up some of the best musical guests of the era in which he played. This guy was good with the trumpet. At some point, he decided he needed to pivot. He needed to pivot away from the gig life and move into something that would provide a more regular and healthier income because he was starting a family. And the band era was beginning to change. So what Jim did is he started a company called Band for Today that would provide band services to schools that did not have access or budgets for band instructors and instruments and whatnot. And I mean, he just did such an amazing job with this business. I asked him, Jim, can you please share your journey with my guests? Because it's just going to be amazing. It's going to benefit them. And he goes in and out of the ups and downs that you face in business as an entrepreneur. And he even gets into how COVID has impacted Band for Today. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim now.
Sure. I'm Jim Jozwiak. I own Band for Today, which is an outsourced company for schools, an outsourced company that provides music programs for schools. Company is 36 years old. I founded it at that 36 years ago, obviously, and we run programs not only regionally in Chicagoland, but also nationally. So we fill a gap for schools that either have cut their arts programs or don't know how to manage or run their programs. So they use Band for Today to supply a music teacher and instruments and a whole program. So that's what we do.
Excellent. So what is what does that look like? Like if we dive into that just a little bit more,
Mhm.
what is your service to the school, to the student, to the parent?
Sure. There's two parts to this. For many years, the one of the keys to what we did, and I'm going to start on the financial piece of this, is that when a school didn't have funds, we could go to a school and say, we will provide you with a music teacher, a band director, instruments, lessons, books, concerts, solo contest, all the things that a band program has, but it won't cost you any money. This is as I am selling to a principal or an administrator. And the reason that is we fee-based it to parents. So if they let us come into the school, do our recruiting, parents would get a flyer home that says, hey, your child tried some instruments today. They'd be great for the band. If you want to sign up for lessons, you can go to our website. You can pay here. By the way, when I started my company, there weren't websites or cell phones and things like that. But I'll talk in more modern terms at this point. So, so it was a win. I hate to use win-win because I don't like cliches, but it was a win-win for both parents and and schools, because the school now has kids playing instruments, taking lessons. They have a teacher, and it's not costing any money to their budget. You can imagine a principal going to their school board saying, well, we can have this program and it costs zero, which I've had schools for 30 years that have never paid us a penny, but parents have funded it. So that was generally what it looked like. When my company went national about 8 years ago, I ran into large public school districts, New York, LA, that came to me and said, or public schools, I should say, that came and said to me and said, we have budget. So that was a different sort of way to adjust what we did. So I'd say, what do you look? How much is your budget? They'd say, we have $20,000. I said, okay, for $20,000 for this school year, we can provide this lessons for this many children, these instruments, these music books, these stands. It became a turnkey operation for them, where they said, hey, perfect, that's the amount on our budget. Now we know we'll have 22 kids in band for the school year. Your teacher will show up and do this. So, so that's a bit of an overview of what we do, but we provide the teacher, the instruments, the music books, the solo contest, honor band, all the things that a school would have with a band program, but it's outsourced where you would consider us a third party vendor.
Yeah, that is amazing. Like, was there anything around like that when you conceived of it?
There was, so I'm from Chicago and I grew up in Chicago, and there's a few little parts of this. So I was a professional musician for many years, and we can talk about that in a bit, but um, many years into my company, I didn't realize that my first band director and music teacher was a fee-based guy. So I grew up on the South Side and went to Catholic school. And on Tuesdays, Mr. Mikas would give me a lesson at school, and then we would have band after school. And I remember my parents paying him like $7 a week. He had an envelope, and they would put the cash in there. And Mr. Mikas went to 5 different Catholic schools running band programs on his own. He was a fee-based band director. And I realized that like later, as I said, oh, that guy's been doing that. That was what he was doing in I think 63, maybe it was on his second grade. So, and then I realized that there were singular people doing this around. So somebody would graduate a music ed degree, they want to be a band director, they couldn't get a job. They would go to private or charter schools or Lutheran schools or schools that didn't have programs and do this fee-based to parents. We were probably, my partner and I at the time were probably the first ones to create a company to do this, where we created a company, we hired the teachers and set up the programs. So we weren't the teachers, we were the owners of the company. And so in those days, a lot of people said, there were just people that would say, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think you can do that. Where are you going to find whatever? But that's irrelevant in a way because, we were able to do it and do it successfully. Now there are a number of companies, probably a bunch actually at this point nationally, that do what we do.
So Jim, tell me then, how did you get from there to here? Like, what's your backstory?
From before starting the company?
Yeah. Because I'm assuming, I'm winking at the camera now because I know Jim. I'm assuming you may have been a musician.
Yeah, that's probably a really good assumption. I knew I'd be interviewed by somebody really smart. So
let me go get him.
Yeah, exactly. So I started playing trumpet when I was in second grade, I think, and played in elementary school, high school, and I tell this story to elementary school kids when I used to do recruiting. But and I'll come back to that part. So in the recruiting, I would say, hey, I played in elementary school, high school, college. I went on to become a professional trumpet player, and I played for many, many big people, including one of the presidents of the United States. And then I look at them, and sometimes they all go, ooh, ooh, and then other times they look at me like blank. And I'd look at them and say, hey, you guys, the president of the United States, you show me some love here or something, come on, and then they'd clap a little bit, and I'd laugh. But so I went to DePaul University for a few years, and I ended up, by that time I was playing so much with so many people professionally and big stars, big people from, world-renowned stars. I started going on the road. So I went on the road with Frankie Valli in 4 Seasons and Bobby Vinton, and then I played with huge comedians like Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis, and people like the Spinners, the Temptations, Four Tops, Tony Bennett, who's won like 19 Grammys. My daughter keeps pressing me to make a list at some point, and maybe one day I will. But in those days, there were many, many, many big stars that had music people with them. So, so I did that into my. I retired from trumpet playing probably in my mid 40s, but through that time, when I also worked in the theater, did a lot of music theater shows, Broadway type shows, and how we started the company was I was teaching and I was teaching private lessons. And when you do private lessons, I was teaching a couple of high schools, and most professional musicians at that time would teach a little bit for extra income. And I was playing tennis with a friend of mine who's another professional trombonist, and we were talking, and he was teaching at a public school district that had lost their program. They had cut the arts. In those days, I guess that was probably the early 80s, many fine arts programs were being cut. When they did budget cuts, and there's talk of that right now. There's been articles in the paper about fine arts programs being cut because taxes and everything with COVID, we may lose fine art programs, music programs, orchestra programs, things like that because of budget cuts. So in those days, that was happening a lot. And so he was in this public school district and he was teaching group lessons with a friend of his. And they were making way more money than I was making by teaching in groups. So, and I hadn't really heard of I sort of knew that in the back of my mind, because when you're in band programs, you see a band director teaching like 6 clarinets or 7 saxes or whatever that looked like. But now if you put the money factor in there, I'm going to a high school, I'm teaching a one-on-one lesson, making, those days it was probably, I think I made $10 a lesson or whatever that was. My buddy would be teaching 6 clarinet players, and if they each paid $5, he was making $30 or $40 or whatever the number was to my 10. So I went like, and I will take pride to say that I thought of the idea for the company, but when he said that, he went, yeah, if we see 7 kids in a group and they pay $700, that's $49 for the same amount of time I'm making 10. So what I thought was, well, why don't we just hire somebody, pay him $20 an hour and keep 30? I mean, it's a pretty simple business prospect. You have income, you have an expense against the income. If there's profit, that's how you make money. So when he said that, I thought, oh, well, why can't we hire? I know like 8 million musicians that I could hire that work for $15 an hour in those days, and we can make 40. So we set them over this, hey, you're going to go teach at that school. We're going to take the money. We're going to pay them. We're going to keep the profit. So that's.
Can I stop you 1 second there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you landed on in that very early day of your company was scalability. Would you want to talk a little bit about scale and what that means?
I can give you a really good example of how I knew that and what I knew. So, by the way, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 17. I haven't had a boss since I was 17. So, and this sort of relates to that. So, in the days of being a professional musician where there were large bands, 10, 15, 18 people playing a job on a Saturday night. So here's what this looked like. In those days, we'd all make like $100 for a Saturday night gig. So the going rate in contracting is the guy that's standing in front of the band and hires them. He would charge the client $200 a guy. So let's say there's 10 guys in the band. So I got 100 and every one of the other musicians got 100, but the leader got 1,000 because he made the extra 100 times 10 guys. So again, this is not too hard to figure out. And in those days, and as a professional, I knew all the guys in the band. I knew the music we were going to play. I knew how to do this. It wasn't that big a deal. And so it was like, well, geez, why don't I just book a gig and I'll hire the same, there were like in those days, thousands of musicians in Chicago and I was in that scene. If I booked a gig, well, I can stand in front of the band leader and introduce us, say, hey, now we're going to play this and turn around and the band plays that. So I think I'd rather be making $1,000 on a Saturday night than 100. So that concept was just obvious to me that those guys were making a lot more money in a good way. And if you could become a contractor, even if it was 5 guys, okay, so now I'm playing a wedding with a little combo that's 5 guys. If the same numbers exist, I made $500 in a Saturday night for a 3-hour wedding, and the guys that I pay made 100. So, that's how like multiples and scalability works. But if you could, I just took that concept and said, oh, if you can teach 5 kids and make 5 times as much money as teaching 1 kid, why wouldn't you do that? And the answer is you should. So that's how as soon as he told me that, I was like, oh, this is easy. We get schools and we hire somebody to work for this and we make this. So that's what that looked like. And that's where it came from, is that I had already been contracting as a professional contractor and musician, and I understood that concept. So it just, when that day came around, I was like, oh, okay, let me keep going on that. And in those days, there were so many schools that had lost their programs that didn't have them, that we just grew profitably from the first year. So first thing we did, we started marketing. We was sitting there stuffing stuff in envelopes and writing addresses and mailing them. And we got 5 accounts the first year, and then easily it went to 10 accounts or 15 accounts, because it was like, it's pretty easy to sell something that doesn't cost anything. You know, it almost sounds like a scam when you say, we can give you this and this and this and this, and it's free, won't cost you anything. Now that sounds like a scam, but it truly wasn't, because when I'm talking to the principal, I'm saying, all I need is time. You give me the time to see the kids, the ability to recruit, we'll set up and run the program. It won't cost you a penny. So that's, like I said, it was an easy sale, and the company grew quickly and was profitable pretty much from the first year on.
So your buddy was already doing the lessons, and then what, usually if somebody makes a career change, there's a reason for it. So
Mhm.
what was the reason was it just the money, or was it circumstances, or?
Well, this is that's a really good thing to bring up. I didn't make a career change at first. When you, Even when I was in the theater shows are about 3 hours. The theater show runs at most 3 hours. So there's 8 shows a week. So you can consider that I would work 24 hours a week, which is not even full time. And I would work that in the evening. So before I had the company, I was always in health. I'd run, I'd practice, I'd work out, I'd enjoy my day. And then at 6 o'clock, I'd put my tuxedo on and I'd drive to the gig and play 3 hours. And at 11 o'clock, I'm done and I'm coming home. And that, musicians can have, if you're successful, can have a nice lifestyle. So I didn't, when the, well, I guess there was another impetus that reminded me of that, which was money, but the being a freelance musician is up and down for your year. Some years I'd be in the theater for 6, 8 months out of 12, which was really more lucrative. And then all of a sudden they would run some shows that didn't need a trumpet player, and it'd be strings, and I'd be off for 6 months or 3 months, and I'd go back to freelancing. So my income year to year was up and down. Um, and this, and also being entrepreneurial and starting a company was really exciting. So it was sort of cool. So for the first 15 years that I had the company, roughly, I still played professionally during the evening. And then when I was at the theater, I remember being on the pay phone in the back kitchen while they were schlepping out dinners and stuff in the afternoon. If it was a matinee, I'd be on the phone calling my partner. We'd be working on business, and I'd have my little briefcase, and I'd have it sit next to me in the pit where I'd work on business stuff. And so it was sort of cool. And that leads me to the fact that a lot of people transition, and what I don't advocate in that would be a total risk. Like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I'm just going to start this coffee shop or whatever heck that is. That's too risky. It's really nice to have the ability to do one job. And Gary Vaynerchuk describes this really well about that if you have a day gig, for instance, and you work from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever that looks like, that's not your time. It's your boss's time. It's your work. But guess what? From 6 to 11 at night, that's your time. You want to start a second job, a second business, a gig economy. You have every single day you can do that, and Saturdays and Sundays. So you can transition. You can keep your job and your income, especially if you're older, you're married, or have kids and things like that. But nobody's got your time from 6 on. And now it's hard work, but it can really pay great dividends and transition you out of one job to another. So I didn't really have to do that. Eventually, the music industry in Chicago, live music, got smaller and smaller and smaller, and I was sort of at that point done. And the business was big and taking over so much time, and at that point I had a kid or maybe two, and it was just a nice transition to retire. And also, trumpet playing is a physical thing. You have to continue to practice and keep your chops up, and you just can't like take a month off and then go back and play a job. You have to continually practice daily. So it just sort of was a smooth transition, and that's how that worked.
Awesome. And it was all very easy, right? You never had any problems at all.
I have a book on my shelf by Darren Hardy called
Yeah.
The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, and I recommend it. I recommend it a lot to young startup entrepreneurs because it's a pretty accurate book in the fact that entrepreneurism is an incredible roller coaster. You have some great highs, you have some really depressing lows, you have uh, it, it, it builds a thick skin, but it's a cool book because it gives you a little front end idea of what you should look forward to as an entrepreneur. So one of the cool things about what I just described in staying as a professional trumpet player was the fact that um, that I didn't have that. I didn't risk it all. You know, at that point, I had a house, I had a wife, I had one kid for sure. So you can't just like go, oh, I'm going to stop all of this and risk it to this. Um, and you know, my wife Leah was an actress and singer. She worked. I met her in the theater. Actually, it was the same sort of thing. Artists, a lot of times, especially in the acting, that sort of range. She did. She worked with one of the biggest modeling agencies in the country, and she did industrial shows and things like that. So, but it was time as, you know, all of a sudden she has a kid and she's sort of, I don't want to say aging out, but it can run its gamut for a lot of people. I know a lot of professional musicians I started with ended up being marketing agents or stockbrokers or in insurance or in other industries because you know sometimes it has a lifespan to it. So in that sense, it wasn't incredibly risky for me, and it just worked smoothly, and it worked out.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well,
So
what I really like about everything you just said, I guess the whole story is you saw that there was either from the guys ahead of you, or guys and ladies who've gone ahead of you. You've gone, this might be a young person's game or a younger person's game, and it's I need to look ahead to something else. Are there other opportunities? You saw another opportunity that like really, just hit you in the face, and then you started to run with it, even though you had people around you. And I don't know if there were people in the industry or not who were saying, yeah, you can't really make that work, you can't find the teachers, you can't. We're always going to have those people, right, who can't see
sure.
what you can see. And then you pursued it in a way that was risk averse, right? It was like, okay, I'm going to do this kind of as a multiple income stream. I'm going to keep my gigs, my job, and then I'm going to build this on the side. So that just sounds like a really smart way to do it.
Yeah, it is, and I'm really a fan of service businesses. When I work with people, service businesses have low risk and low upfront financial requirements. If somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm going to be a yoga instructor," and it's very easy for me to coach them and talk to them about starting with private clients, being portable, being able to take your stuff to their house. There's a lot of ways to do service businesses to start. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to build a manufacturing plant and manufacture this, that is a whole different ballgame. That's, you know, the amount of upfront cost. And now when I have those discussions with people, it's like, well, do you have any money? They go, well, no, I'm going to try to get a business loan. And it leads to a discussion that you're not getting a business loan. Unless you own a big house with a lot of equity, a banker's not going to give you a business loan to start a food truck that you have no experience in. That's pretty much, I don't want to say it's 100% because I hate to do that, but I'm pretty certain that when you walk into, I know what happens when you walk in the bank and look for a loan. I know exactly what happens. And, you know, I try to be gentle with them, but you're basically not getting the money. You know, it's, you know, you can do it on credit cards, you can borrow it from relatives, but you're not getting money from a bank. So I try to coach people into how can we start this with a low budget and low risk and take our time and build it little by little. And all of a sudden you start building it and that gives you a little more cash. You save some more money, get a little more cash. And then all of a sudden a year or two later, you can make the next move. I've seen businesses that are seven figures that people have started in their backyard. And it transitioned from the backyard with 5 people or 10 people doing something. And then all of a sudden it's now to a church basement where they rent. Then it goes from the church basement to leasing their first small office or small place to then buying a building, but I've seen that transition with many of my entrepreneurial friends over the years. And that is all of that thing that I just described is pretty much low risk, high reward, which I'm into that formula. And also it puts it on you as a hard worker. There's a lot of people that can be successful, but man, it takes time and work, So it's there's a saying that my business coach, I've had a business coach for a really long time, and one of the sayings, he didn't coin this, but I heard it first from him, and that no one is coming. And that could sound like a sad or negative thing, but it's really good news. No one, and I guess the sad part is it's really, really true. No one is going to save you. No one can do your push-ups. No one can do your work. No one can build your business. It is on you. So whatever happens, you're responsible for. If I sit here and I weigh 800 pounds and I just got back from the ice cream store, who's responsible for that? The ice cream store, So that's my big philosophy, that I love having control. If it doesn't happen, it's on me, and that's what gives entrepreneurs a thick skin. But I believe in that type of philosophy. Okay, let me finish that on a more positive note. On the positive side is, because that could be construed as sort of negative. On the positive side, it's that that we have this opportunity in America to do things like that we can create businesses. We can, and as Sam says, and I'll quote Sam a lot because I've been with him a really long time, you can make money. You can always make money. It's not this, people are afraid of money and they have this, we talked earlier about something about self-esteem, and this is semi-related, but so there's a lot of baggage and emotional ties to money. And one of the things Sam taught me is that you don't have to have those emotional ties, that you can always make more money. You can always make changes and do things to create wealth. Wealth is creatable. It's not some secret thing. So just self-driven is that, no one is coming, but that's okay because you can drive your own thing. You don't need to rely on a boss. You don't need to rely, how many middle managers in 2 days ago, I think it's American Airlines is cutting 17,000 jobs, 17,000. So, and at my age and coming up sort of from the 80s and seeing people that worked in corporate environment, middle managers, guys are 45, 50, 55 years old. And guess what? The company says, hey, things aren't going so well. We're going to cut 1,000 jobs. So all of a sudden that 55-year-old sitting in Starbucks getting interviewed by a 30-year-old. And I've seen it, and it breaks my heart. And what used to be security in the corporate world is no longer like that. And when, my dad was in World War II, so I come from that era of hard work, and what that came through is we built corporations, and the middle America dream was to get a job, good benefits, have a payroll, paycheck, retire. So what used to seem so secure and good went away. And now you can walk in any single day and get fired. You are not and what people would seem as an entrepreneur being really risky, like, oh man, you don't know where your next paycheck's, you got to create your own money, turned out to be way more in the right situation. It became much more secure than me not knowing if I'm going to be fired today, because I don't control my own destiny. It's my boss or the boss above him. And if the corporation says we're cutting 1,000 jobs, that's what happens. So, you can look at it in those ways. That is what I do or what entrepreneurs do risky or not risky. I contend that it's less risky than working for somebody.
Well, and what I hear in your demeanor is you are a realist or a pragmatist, and and you're an optimist,
Sure.
especially when it comes to your abilities.
Well, yeah, I am an optimist. Despite my face and despite my voice, um, I am very, very optimistic and generally very, very positive. I actually got that from my mother. She was always really positive. She grew up really, really poor, and she would always talk to us about, hey, if you got a roof over your head, you got warm meals, you got a good bed to sleep in. In other words, you got that kind of stuff. Everything's good. So I always had that positive philosophy, and I've generally been successful in most things that I've attempted or tried at some level. Um, and by learning from other people and having good coaching and understanding, and long term, the longer you're in this, the more you go through those up and downs, you sort of expect them. The reason I give the roller coaster book to these young entrepreneurs is that I want them to know that this is coming. There's no surprise, don't be surprised when you hit a brick wall on something or something fails and you have to change into something else, or you have to use some other skills, or you're laying in bed at night and payrolls due on your company's payrolls due on Friday and it's Wednesday and you're short $3,000 or $10,000 and you're going, how am I making that? That will give you a thick skin really fast, and that's what I'm talking about. And so it's not particularly easy at times to be an entrepreneur, but um, but with the right help and the right approach and stuff, you get through those, and you know you you can be successful.
Yeah. So you were talking about how somebody might begin in their backyard, and then they're in the church basement, and then they get their own place and have a business, a brick and mortar kind of thing, and they're growing and
Mhm.
growing and growing. Would you be able to bring us through those steps with Band for Today?
Well, yeah, because I is a service business. Well, here's what it looked like when I started my business. Um, we really only needed to have a small copier and a fax machine in those days, and we needed to be able to hire people and put them into school. So I never had a physical location, which is great because all my locations were everywhere. So in my specific deal was that, excuse me, we would I would let's talk about growth of the company. So once I knew the concept of what we were going to do, then it was how do we get more of these? How do we get more schools? How do we learn to hire? How do we learn to train and manage? How do we learn to fire? How do I learn to deal with um, principals and accountants? My first, in the early years, there was a huge school district in the west side of Chicago and the suburbs here that cut all their programs. And our company was really young, and I was what I would consider young at the time. And they asked and it was very, very contentious. This district had 11 elementary schools. They cut all the music programs, all the art programs, and now they were considering this fee-based company like mine. So there was a huge board meeting. Of course, it was contentious. All the people in the gymnasium, and the all the school board was up on stage, and they all half of them had doctorates and everything. And I like quit college to be a trumpet player. So it's like, oops. So now they have me and my buddy in the audience, and they say, well, we have these two representatives from this company we're looking at, and we'd like them to stand up and say some things about the company. And if you flash forward to now, I can pretty much talk in front of anybody at any time. I could wake up and start talking to people, and I had no fear for the most part. But in those days, just being a new company owner and being in a new situation and seeing how this would be a great account and the contentiousness in the room. And here I am, like, I'm a trumpet player and I'm going to talk to this guy with a doctorate. It's like, oh, like, really? So when I stood up, my knees were shaking and rattling like you couldn't. I was so nervous. It'd be funny to have a video of what that looked like, but I stumble out words of what I could do and say. And in those early days, I was nervous talking to principals, but as it, I guess the point of this is as you go along through your journey, you learn more, you get more successful, it gives you more confidence. more ability. And it's hard to have confidence like in a new thing with it, because you don't have any depth, you don't have any background or age to it. Um, when I first started playing professionally and I started playing with big people, I was really nervous. But after 5 years of playing with fellow musicians and peers, and with my experience, I was a lot less nervous, and I knew I was a good player and I knew I belonged there. So everyone has to go through that, or is going to go through that, through this journey. So this is a sort of a long story to come back to this thing. So we would market and we started getting accounts. So I just learned everything along the way as I did this. I didn't have to have physical buildings and stuff. We just had to hire more. We started marketing in other towns like Rockford and in the city and just different places, and just kept building the business that way. Then we learned that we needed to do staff meetings. We needed to learn how to do rental of instruments. We expanded into that. And I have a million stories about how we sort of built it, but I don't know if that
Well,
answers.
it seems like the two key things you had to have were you had to have your system for what you were selling, so what your services were,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had to have the marketing slash sales, right?
Right.
Because you had to
Yeah.
go and you had to sell it. So,
Yeah.
once you had your system together, which I'm assuming that changed over time, like
Sure.
it just got better, right? Or you could kind of pick and remove things to suit your client's needs.
Mm-hmm.
How challenging was the marketing selling aspect of this?
Originally, well, if you had to go in face to face, the nice thing was that there were so many schools that needed our service that, for instance, if I sold to a principal, and principal said, "Hey, this is great," and we were selling in those days to lower income schools and schools that just no other band person would go out to. So it was, they'd say, "Hey, yeah, if you can send me somebody for free to do band, that's perfect." So they would be in council. So that principal would meet with, say, 5 to 10 other principals once a month in a, they would get together in a meeting, and just like a staff meeting within their district. So it was very easy for them. I'd say, "Hey, sister so-and-so, would you," if she was the principal, say, "Would you tell the other people about me? And I'd give you some extra pamphlets and stuff." And so one led to another to another. So all of a sudden you had 5 schools in that grouping. And once you get some accounts, it gives you viability. It gives you, I can't think of the right word, but when you go to sell somewhere else, you can go, "Hey, we're already at this school and this school and this school and this school and this school. Here's references. Just call one of those principals." And they say, "Oh, well, if you're in those schools, I know that principal over there. You're probably okay." When you don't have any references like that, it's a little harder. Like, "Well, where have you done this?" "You're the first, man." That's a little tougher sell. But once you get a little momentum, and Tony Robbins calls it momentum, I think traction and momentum, is that you get, little by little, and then and you just keep. So the sales weren't, and we didn't really have competition for the most part then, so it grew pretty quickly. We were, like I said, we were able to expand. All of a sudden, we'd buy a not a database because it didn't exist in itself, like a piece that had names and addresses of all schools, like in Rockford or Springfield or Indianapolis or whatever. And then we would just sit down and create a nice letterhead piece, an advertising piece, stuff it, and send it. And then you pick up another school and you pick up another school. So, and as you do that, you just learn about your business and try to keep improving and figuring out how to
And
do things
you
better.
were beating the streets, right? I mean, you were out there hustling and meeting with people.
Well, if they wanted me to, yeah. And in those days, mostly they did. I recall sending information and then calling schools and that sort of thing, and they'd say, "Yeah, we'll come in and meet us and stuff." You couldn't do Zoom meeting stuff, and it is, in those days it was a bit important to. I mean, I've gotten many times schools that they don't even need me. We're emailing each other and they say, "Sounds like a great program. Your website sounds great." And I said, "Here's what we're doing." I have a school in Los Angeles right now that we tried to do a program 2 years ago. It didn't fly. Numbers weren't good, but I sent her a note. I said, "Hey, we're doing this virtually now. You want to try it?" And she goes, "Hey, perfect. I'll send you the contract." So I've never met that principal, and I probably will never meet that principal, but we probably will have a program there this year, virtually. So, but in those days, yeah, I would I wouldn't cold call in schools because I wasn't too much of a fan of that. I think selling is hard, but we would do a lot of marketing materials. But then they would call, or I would follow up with the call, and they'd say, "Hey, yeah, come in and talk to us." And as I did that, it got easier because once I had some schools and I knew what I was doing, I say, "Well, this is how this works. This is the program," and they. And the other thing too is this is my life didn't depend on it. It wasn't like I had a sales quota. It wasn't like I was trying to make my full living from this, which creates tons of pressure. And I'm sort of always been like that. When the company got really successful, I would love to land accounts and love to land things, but if it doesn't work, it's not the end of my life. We're successful, and I have that attitude when I talk to people, not a flippant attitude, just they can hear in my voice that this is what we do, this is how we do it. We're really good at this. They hear my passion, they know how long I've been doing it. So it's on them if they want to use this or not. And if they don't want to use this, guess what? The next marketing piece that goes out, I'll get 5 more inquiries. So it doesn't become a life and death thing. People smell desperate. I learned that from somebody that I totally agree with. They smell when you're on the phone trying to hustle them.
Yeah.
And I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that, so I don't do it. It's not in my personality anyway.
So as you grow this business, and you had mentioned earlier that you're going to hire a band teacher, an instructor to go in and work with the students. That seems to be like the next biggest linchpin after selling it, is who's going to go teach the kids. Like, and how many different schools have you worked with at a time?
You mean we're in a year? How many do I have?
Yeah.
50 to 70 some years.
And I guess I'm getting after, how many instructors did you need, band teachers?
Probably the most we've had in a year is 15.
Okay.
Because they go to a full-time teacher can see 5, 6, 7 schools in a week, sometimes 10, because some of the programs are small. So they'll go to a school on Monday morning, teach for 2 hours and teach 12 kids, 13 kids. Then middle of the day from 11 to 1, they'll go to another school that's 20 minutes away or half an hour. They teach another 10 or 15 kids. Then at the end of the day, they might go to another school from 2 to 3:30, teach another 10 kids. So this comes back to money and crunching, knowing your numbers, which means that if that teacher saw 40 kids in a day, and here was the revenue from 40 kids, and I paid the teacher this, what's the profit margin? If it's not too much, then you don't have a good business, or you have a problem because you go out of business. So it's pretty easy. So our job was to figure out schedules, figure out timing, try to guess at numbers, seeing how many kids would be at a school. So some accounts would be large. You'd have 50, 60 kids in a school, which would take months. So it was nice. The amount of kids that were at a school was reflective of how many hours the teacher would be there. So if it was a small school and there were only 12 kids, we put 6 beginners in one class and 6 intermediate kids in the next class, and there's your hour and a half of teaching. And then you're out.
So was there income coming in apart from the teacher's fee?
Just in rentals. So we originally didn't start with rentals. It was just a lesson program. But little by little, in the early years, I used an outside company to do the instrument rentals, and then they gave me a commission. So if they did 400 instruments a month, and they gave me $5 in instruments, that's $2,000 or something a month extra. And I didn't have to deal with the instruments. I didn't have to buy them. I didn't have to front the money. But little by little, we transitioned into doing the rentals ourselves, which was much, much more money if we did them ourselves. So, and again, all learning curves. And then I had to find a distributor. I had to find somebody that would sell me instruments, even though I didn't have a storefront, retail, taxes. How do you repair flutes and clarinets and trumpets? How do you pay off the debt on them? I'll give you a story, entrepreneurial story. So in the early days, in the old days, how you bought musical instruments where there were music stores everywhere, little mom and pop music stores, and you go in and try a trumpet, and that's what I did, and rent one or buy one. So In the early 80s, a guy named Dennis Bamber started a place called Woodwind and Brasswind. It was in South Bend, Indiana. And it was your first catalog driven music place. It was almost like a Sears catalog. And in those days, and this is sort of how it goes with entrepreneurial things, a lot of people didn't like Dennis opening the Woodwind and Brasswind. So because he could buy in humongous volumes, he had warehouses in South Bend. And so when your mom and pop store in Oak Lawn, your music store, there was one on 95th Street, Rossi's Music, when they would want to buy flutes from Gemeinhardt or Armstrong, they would call and buy, I need 5 of these or 3 of these, and they'd buy 5 saxes, and they'd buy a few trumpets, and they'd buy small amounts. Well, Dennis would call up Armstrong and buy 1,000 of each level of Armstrong flutes, and 500 of the Gemeinhardts, and 600 of these. He had thousands and thousands of instruments. So he was getting instruments cheaper than guys could, sell them for. So as professionals, so now we're going to go in the rental business. So we already had a successful lesson business. So we might need, 200 instruments, like $70,000 worth of instruments or whatever. So I call up Dennis and say, hey, we got this company, blah, blah, blah. We play professionally in Chicago. He sort of knew guys here. He goes, yeah, come down. He said, just bring a truck. Okay. So me and my buddy rent a U-Haul. We drive to South Bend. He said, tell me what you need. So we sat down and said, we need like 25 flutes, 30 saxes, 50 trumpets, whatever, drums. We load up the back of the U-Haul with $70,000 worth of instruments. And he said, okay, here's our agreement. Every month you're going to pay me this amount of money until it's paid off. So, okay, sign here, we sign there. It wasn't even a contract. It was just like, you would consider it a handshake. So here we are, me and my buddy. It's sort of like Seinfeld, Kramer's and here we are driving back from South Bend with the guy just gives us $70,000 worth of instruments on a handshake. It's like, what? I mean, that was, and I just 3 years ago, I ran into Dennis at a conference, and I told him that story. I said, everybody I talk to, I tell people that story, that how nice you were as a business person to let 2 young guys come down there and pack up a U-Haul and drive away with your instruments, and he didn't say much about it. I mean, he did, it was like, yeah, I remember that, and everything. And so that's, my friend and coach Sam says, he gave us some advice on that. He goes, you know what? Every once in a while, ask for something big. He said, just really big. He said, outrageously big. He said, don't expect to get it, because obviously you're asking for something like really outrageously big, but you never know when somebody's going to say, okay, and when I look back on the story of going to Woodwind and Brasswind, and it was like, I didn't think it was that outrageous at the time. I thought it was we were a good risk because we were honest. But when you think it on his part, it's like, really? I mean, where would you go that somebody would let you do that? But without signing away your life or something, and there's 2 professional, like, trumpet player, like, backing up a U-Haul. So anyway, we got the instruments and we went into the rental business. Then we had to learn about the rental business because it was really, really hard. We had a lot of drops. The money was hard. And it was like, new learning curve.
Wow.
On that. Well, as an overview, always continue to learn and tweak your business and get better and better and better. And you work through the ups and downs. When I took my company national, so I had my company for 30 years. I knew exactly how it worked inside and out. It's like, so all of a sudden the company, here's a couple of things. So somebody took my company national, and people have told me that for years. Oh, you should do this nationally, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. So, and it's funny because taking a company national is hard, and people told me it's impressive, which, okay, maybe it is. So I was at a conference with principals sell in Chicago. So, I got the band company there and everything. And across the aisle from me is a guy selling some curriculum. And we were all vendors in this large ballroom. So I said, so there's a lot of downtime because the principals are out of stuff. And the guy comes over and we start talking, and he said, I said, what do you do? And he says, I wrote this curriculum and I'm selling it to schools and stuff. And what do you do? And I told him, and he goes, how are you marketing? I said, well, doing email marketing and print marketing and stuff, that sort of thing. And he goes, well, what about using independent reps? I said, what do you mean? He goes, see most of the people sitting in this room behind things. I said, yeah. He goes, none of them really work for those companies. They're just independent people who are doing it sort of commission based. And here's, now these are light bulb moments. This is, and I think fast and work fast, and I understand stuff fast. And I've been in industry, in many, many different industries for a long time. So there isn't much I sort of don't know in certain areas, but I had never heard of an independent education rep. And I said, oh, when he said that, he goes, yeah. He said, I have people right now. So we're staying in Chicago. I have people right now, like in 6 different states, selling my stuff. And I went, oh. And he said, on commission, so I don't pay them anything unless they make a sale. So remember I talked about low risk, high reward? So there's your, and I went, oh. He goes, I have contracts right here with me. I have people approaching me, some of these independent reps saying, hey, can I do Indiana or can I do Ohio? And like, so he signs into a deal. They market his stuff. If they make a sale, they get 10% or 15%, whatever it is of the sale, and he gets a sale. So I'm going like, oh, geez, that is like, I never heard of that. So one thing leads to another. I talked to a woman that's there who's an independent rep in California. We set up a deal. It doesn't work out with her, but I decided, I'm going to throw something up on LinkedIn. She's really nice. Loved her. Everything was great. I happened to be going to a conference in San Francisco where she was, like, in 2 weeks. I said, why don't we meet there? My wife's going to come out. We can talk about this over dinner. So we go out there and we set up this deal. And same thing. She's gonna sell. She goes, I want the whole state of California. And I'm like, okay. I don't care. It's like, because I'm not hiring you. I'm not paying you. It's like, you can take the whole state. And if you sell something, great. You made money and I made money. So in the meantime, so we meet in California, set up a deal. Everything's okay. Basically a handshake deal. So I decide, well, this could work. So I put up a post on LinkedIn. And I've never been hardly on LinkedIn. I wasn't a fan of it. It just wasn't for me, especially in those days. LinkedIn's gotten a lot better. So I did a post. And I just wrote an article and said, hey, I'm doing this. This is a commission-based thing for education reps. And there was a lot of positives to what I wrote, because it wasn't a one-time, like for this curriculum guy, it'd be a one-time sale. The school district in South Dakota is only going to need a new psychology book once every 10 years, right? So that's a one-time sale. Somebody working for me as a commission-based, as long as I have that account as generating revenue, they would get revenue. So it's a much more positive thing. So I wrote this piece on LinkedIn and got a few inquiries from people trying to sell me stuff. And I get an email from my manager, and she said, somebody from academic and entertainment wants to talk to you about you posting LinkedIn. I'm thinking, doesn't sound particularly like, but whatever, it didn't matter. I mean, I was just making a guess off the thing. So Gina was from outside of Seattle, Washington. She had an education. So she calls. We talk for 2 hours. We get along famously. We have same personalities. She was so excited about my company. And it turned out she had been marketing nationally for school assemblies. So she hired people across the United States, like somebody like a comedian or an anti-bullying guy or the science chicks or something like that. And she would market assemblies across the United States. She's successful. So we talk on like a Wednesday. She says, let's talk tomorrow. So the next day we talk for like 2 hours. Same thing. We're just explaining the whole thing. And she and I are both really passionate. So the following Monday, she goes to my website, she pulls everything off, she puts it on Academics Entertainment's website. And by this time, we still didn't really talk about money. I was like, whatever, we'll get to that. So she starts marketing it, and like within 2 days, we were getting calls nationally from my company. So she really took my company national. We ended up being in 9 states for a few years. And what happened is when I talked to Gina, I said, look, I've got this other woman who's going to do California. And she said, that's fine. We'll market in the other states or whatever. And she can have California. So when I talked to the woman, Rose was her name, I think, I said, you know, I have this other company that I want to use in the other states, and you can take, and she got all bummed out and she was all upset and she didn't want to do it then. And I was being totally honest with her, and it was like, and I knew Gina would be honest and not market. And if you, I mean, California is like bigger than like 50 countries in the world. I mean, if you can, I think you could probably, if you can do it in California, you're probably okay. So anyway, so that's why it didn't work out, and I felt really bad that she couldn't just split. I mean, not even split the country, just take one state and the other company will do this anyway. So that was a long way to get around pivotal things. That sometimes one thing, one article, I've seen this a bunch of times, one email, one being open-minded to that. So Gene and I eventually got the money, and she gets 20% of my revenue for every account she gets me nationally. And that's a sort of a big number, but she's made me a lot of money, and she's made some amount of money from me, which is great. And but when the company went national, it was a whole different thing. Even though I knew my company really strongly, all of a sudden trying to figure out how I'm going to run a school in California from Chicago and do the hiring and shipping the instruments and doing repairs and monitoring the teacher and marketing. It was, at first year was really, really, really hard. I flew all over the country doing the recruiting myself. And it was exhausting and hard. But what happened is,
when you say you flew around the country doing the recruiting, are you talking about the teachers or the students, or both?
The students. I would meet with teachers in certain, if we had them, like we would go on Indeed or whatever to find resumes. And if it worked out where I had somebody when I went out there, I'd have dinner with them, or they'd meet me at the school and do that. But it was, a lot of it was recruiting, where I would, and that means shipping thousands of flyers, shipping instruments, taking it through airports, renting a car, driving to some elementary school in the middle of nowhere, or whatever that looked like. So it was, all that has to be done usually in the fall when it's like crunch time. But over the years, within like 2 years, I got better and better at it. I found more efficiencies. I found ways to do things quicker and easier. Sometimes sending a master teacher, and I didn't have to go shipping instruments ahead of time rather than me carrying them. There were a lot of ways. And then if I had a school over multiple years, I would just leave the instruments there. And then the new teacher could just clean them up, re-tag them. So now you're not shipping instruments back and have that cost. So you have money efficiency, you have time efficiencies, you have marketing efficiencies that you learn. So that was a pivotal thing. It was hard to do, but it really took hard work and learning. And then I was able to figure, okay, now I understand. So now school calls me, and even not doing certain things. Like I got a call like 6 months ago from a principal in Montana, superintendent. And he goes, oh, we'd love to have your program. So I look up his town. It's got 600 people in the middle of Montana. I said, I'd love to do your program, but I can't hire. I can't find you a teacher, a band director in a town of 600. It's hard enough to find teachers in town sometimes. But see, that was something that, you're programmed to take every account and every lead and try to make it successful. But when it crashes and burns and you can't figure it out, or it costs you too much money, or you lose money, you go, oh, that wasn't a good idea. How do we fix that? And then how we fix it is we judge it by location, or we judge it by population, and those sort of things. So you just keep learning. So that was a pivotal thing. And then, okay, one last thing. So I am in the school education business. So what happened in March to my business? So they closed every one of my accounts. It'd be like it saying, okay, you have a restaurant, as we know, nobody can go in there anymore. Oh, well, how am I going to make money? Well, I don't know, but nobody's going in there. So they closed all my accounts. So that was an incredible shift for us online, and how we did that and how we attacked it and stuff. And we don't know the final outcome of that, because we're now into the fall where things we thought would be better and back to semi-normal, but they're not. So my company is, there's your thick skin and there's your entrepreneur roller coaster right there. Who'd ever think in the history of the world, we'd never gone through this. That they would close every restaurant in New York. They would close Broadway, every musician, every actor. They would close Hollywood. No movies being made. You know, millions and millions of people out of work. That's like, if you told me that one day they're going to close every school in the country, I mean, that'd be laughable. You know, nobody would believe that. Here we are. So anyway, that would be a seminal probably moment in my company's or my entrepreneurial journey.
So what was the pivot? Like, how long did it take you to determine that you would need to pivot and then to get to work on that?
Like
For
about 2 hours.
COVID, about 2 hours.
Like, yeah. I mean, when that happened, it was early March, and all of a sudden we were a week into March, and everything's crashing, and they're saying we're closing all schools, and it was like, oh, so now people pay me monthly, and I have a staff on contracts that are every 2 weeks are supposed to get a paycheck, and if people don't pay me, I don't have money to pay my teachers, so the business could just go under. So, which you recognize really quickly. So we have used technology a lot. I've been hiring on Zoom since Zoom started, and we knew and music lessons have been given online over the last like 5-10 years. There's companies called takelessons.com. There's a bunch of companies that give lessons like this. So we spent between Friday and Sunday night, like working every hour, developing a plan on how we were going to offer lessons through Zoom, how we were going to, what that would look like, how many people could do it, how can we get the parents to buy into it? Because parents would say, oh, we can't do lessons online. Remember, this is most of the people around didn't even know what the hell Zoom was in March. Seriously. I mean, now everybody in the world knows what it is. But in those days, people really didn't, a lot, especially parents. But so we had to, as an entrepreneur, I had to work much more quickly than schools. Schools were like closing and thinking, oh, we're probably open April 1st and Easter break, spring break's coming, right? They were all casual about it. I didn't have the ability to be casual. I'm trying to hit those people's credit cards every 15th automatically. And so if you're a parent, you're going, hey, you didn't give us lessons, I can give you my money back. This is what I teach entrepreneurs about how hardcore this is. That there's no wiggle room in this. It's either you have the money and you pay your expenses or you go out of business. My teachers weren't going to stick around if I couldn't pay them. So now I got 1,000 customers and no income. So to answer that quickly is we incredibly fast put our lessons online, got our schedules set up, taught our teachers what was going on, figured out how to do this, sent emails to parents saying, this is what's going on. Here's your schedule. You have the same teacher. You have this. And it was, now you got teachers teaching out of their apartment, out of their home. I mean, the whole thing. And then there were many, many issues with this. Zoom crashed right away. You could use, are we going to record these on YouTube? Are we going to do them live? Are we going to, we ended up not doing them live. Now I think about it. We ended up recording videos every week for the appropriate kids for everything. So we were doing like 80 videos a week for all of our students from our teachers. But that caused upload problems. Like all of a sudden my teacher going, hey, I've been trying to upload a video for 8 hours. The internet went nuts and Zoom went nuts. So now again, how do we solve that? So we kept, the amount of decisions you make as an entrepreneur and how you fix things is incredible. So we got it fixed and worked it out and got the bugs out and kept 80% of our students through the end of May. I was able to pay everybody their salaries, and then I had to make some decisions after that regarding the fall. But we got through that time by working really hard and figuring out a new way. And it was funny because like 4 weeks later after March, all of a sudden they go, hey, Chicago public schools are going online and we're going to do it like this. And I'm thinking, where have you guys been for 4 weeks? We've been like, we hit it like immediately. And most of my good entrepreneurial friends had to, in these kind of businesses, had to do the same thing because, in a way, you either fold it or you got to figure it out. So that's what we did.
Cool. How does the future look for you right now?
Cloudy would be the first word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I think we are just starting to market. Um, some schools just started around here, and we're marketing to our principals, we're marketing to our parents. I if I can get 30% of the revenue or business that I had last year, I would be, I don't want to say I'd be happy, but it'd be okay. My company would probably lose 70% of the revenue it had, which is a lot. It's sort of, I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends, and we have mastermind calls like weekly, and everybody is, and these are people from, there's somebody in Alaska, West Coast, Seattle, New York, they're all over the country, but same issues, and uh, in same numbers. It's pretty much my position. Everybody is survive. If you want to keep your business, you just got to try to survive and keep your business afloat, because this may go away in a year or two, and that sounds long to people. But when you've been in business a really long time, if you can survive a year or two, this could come back and continue to have a successful business. The model is okay. I mean, there's going to be some other changes, but I mean, uh, you got to survive.
Hey, Jim, I want to thank you once again for being my guest. I want to thank you for everything that you shared, your transparency around the roller coaster ride of being an entrepreneur. And I just want to touch on a few points that I thought were just invaluable from Jim. I love his low risk, high reward look at service businesses. I think that I would agree with him entirely. I work with a lot of product development businesses, and when you have to develop a product, you are looking at a whole lot of expense going into actually making something and packaging it and shipping it. The logistics are crazy, the expense is crazy, and then you need to have a sales force on the other side that is going to work 24/7 to get it out the door for you to be able to um, pay for everything that you've invested into it. Low risk, high reward service businesses often allow us to control that expense and really make quick changes on the fly that other businesses may not. And you could hear that in Jim's story. He made a lot of changes as he went along. Quick pivots to answer the bell in a way that would bring more income and more profit, and maybe also kind of take care of any challenges that might come up to try and rob him of profit or any other issues that might arise. I also really like that he grew his team to include sales reps. There is work being done while he sleeps, right? People are out there selling, and he doesn't have to pay them anything until they make a sale. So that's a really, really awesome resource to have. And it's something that can, just make your business grow by leaps and bounds. And my last point is he has a business that scales. And by that, I mean, he can offer services not just in one place, but in many places across the states. He just needs to make sure that he can find the band instructor to be able to be in that area to do the work that needs to be done. And now that he's online and he's dealing with COVID and working through it, they've got a new paradigm to their business. They're online teaching. And, it's hit the business hard, but he is hopeful and he is working to bring the income back up to where it was. So, really, really great information. And, the last thing that he spoke about that really hit me was coaching. Did you hear him throughout the show? He kept talking about coaching and his coach, and he coaches people. And he talked about mastermind groups. So I actually have another session with Jim where he's going to talk about coaching and masterminds, and just look out for that in the future. That'll probably be on in a few weeks, okay? Really, really good stuff. So thanks again, Jim. I really appreciate you, and I wish you the best for your business. And for the rest of you, as I get ready to sign off here, thanks for coming to see the Breakthrough Creative, to listen to what it is that we have to share week in and week out as we speak with different professional artists or business people who are going to share their hard-won experience with you so that you can get out there into the world and you can make a living creating and selling something that you make. I want you to go and start working on that right now, because that's why you're watching this, right? You want to go and do it. So for the Breakthrough Creative, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business, I'm John McDavitt, and I hope you have an awesome week. See you next week.